In 1947, Frank Sinatra was thrown to the floor of a Las Vegas casino, a gangster's boot crushing his chest, 72 hours to find $50,000 or lose his legs forever. He called everyone he knew. His bandleader hung up. His movie studio refused. His own mother said she could not help. And then, from the most unexpected place in America, a stranger paid the entire debt and demanded that Sinatra never learn the truth. Las Vegas, Nevada, Saturday, the 8th of February, 1947, 17 minutes past 3 in the morning. The Flamingo Casino blazed in the desert like a pink neon fever dream. $6 million poured into concrete, glass, and one man's vision of turning this dusty wasteland into America's playground. Inside, the air hung thick with cigar smoke, French perfume, spilled bourbon, and that unmistakable stench of desperation that seeps into the carpet of every place where people gamble away money they cannot afford to lose. Frank Sinatra stood at the craps table in the far corner of the gaming floor. If any of his screaming Bobby Soxers had seen him at that moment, they would have walked right past without recognition. His silk bow tie hung loose around his neck like a noose waiting to be tightened. His custom white shirt from Solka of Fifth Avenue was unbuttoned to the chest, sweat-soaked, clinging to his skin. His famous blue eyes, those legendary eyes that made teenage girls faint and grown women weep, were bloodshot, ringed with dark circles, pupils dilated from 31 hours without sleep and enough Old Forester bourbon to pickle a bull. One chip sat in front of him, $100, his last $100 on this earth. If you want to find out how this incredible story ends, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tap the bell so you never miss what comes next. He had started the night with $12,000, money he did not have, money he had borrowed against future recording sessions, money that had seemed like nothing when he was winning, when the dice loved him, when beautiful women pressed against his shoulders and whispered that he was the luckiest man alive. That was 14 hours ago. Now the dice tumbled across the green, felt one final time. Sinatra watched them bounce, spin, settle. 7, craps, loss. The croupier, a small man with a pencil mustache and eyes that had witnessed 10,000 such moments, swept away the last chip with the same motion he had used to sweep away the 11,900 before it. Better luck next time, Mr. Sinatra. But there would be no next time, because Frank Sinatra had just lost $52,400 he did not possess. And the man who owned this casino was not the forgiving type. Sinatra reached for his bourbon. His hand was trembling so badly that amber liquid sloshed over the rim and onto his fingers. And then a voice came from behind him, a voice that turned his blood to slush. Having problems, Carlo? Every muscle in Sinatra's body locked. He knew that voice. Everyone in Las Vegas knew that voice. It belonged to Benjamin Seagull, Bugsy, the man who had built this pink palace in the desert, the man who had personally beaten 11 people to death with his bare hands, and those were only the ones the police knew about, the man whose nickname came from the insect swarm rages that could descend upon him without warning, transforming him from charming host to savage animal in the space of a heartbeat. Sinatra turned slowly. Bugsy Siegel stood 5 paces away, perfectly framed by the golden light spilling from the chandelier above. He wore an immaculate white dinner jacket, not a crease or wrinkle anywhere. His dark hair was pomaded back from his forehead in sleek waves. His blue eyes, journalists called them angel eyes because they belonged on a Renaissance cherub, were fixed on Sinatra with an expression of absolute zero. 4 men in dark suits flanked him like shadows made flesh. The gaming floor had gone quiet. Conversations died mid-sentence. The orchestra stopped playing. 200 people turned to watch what was about to happen, because everyone in this room understood that something terrible was about to unfold, and not one of them would lift a finger to stop it. "Mr. Siegel." Sinatra's voice cracked on the second syllable, and he hated himself for it. "I was just about to come find you, about the credit situation." Seagull raised one hand, a small gesture, almost gentle. Sinatra stopped talking. "Carlo," Seagull said without looking at the croupier, "how much does our friend owe the house?" $52,400, Mr. Seagull. Tonight's losses plus the outstanding balance from last weekend." Seagull nodded slowly. $52,400. He seemed to taste each word. "That is a substantial sum, Frankie, even for a big star like you. I can get it. I have a recording contract, concerts lined up. I just need a few weeks to—" Seagull moved, one fluid step forward. His hand shot out like a striking snake, grabbed Sinatra's collar, twisted the expensive fabric until it cut into the singer's windpipe, and with one savage, impossibly powerful wrench, he threw Frank Sinatra onto the floor of the Flamingo Casino. The voice of America hit the red carpet spine first. The impact drove the air from his lungs. Before he could suck in a breath, before his brain could process what had just happened, Bugsy Siegel's polished black Oxford pressed down onto his chest. Not hard enough to break ribs, just hard enough to pin him in place, just hard enough to make a point that would never be forgotten by anyone who witnessed it. 200 people stared in absolute silence. Sinatra could hear his own heartbeat thundering in his ears, could feel the cold sweat soaking through his shirt to the carpet beneath him, could see from this angle the faces of the onlookers, horrified, fascinated, grateful that it was not them lying on this floor. "You think you are somebody, Italian boy?" Siegel's voice was soft, almost intimate. He did not need to shout. In that cathedral silence, every syllable carried to the farthest corners of the room. "You think, because teenage girls wet themselves when you open your mouth, you can play at my tables, lose my money, and walk away smiling." He leaned down. His face descended until it was inches from Sinatra's, close enough that the singer could smell Cuban cigar on his breath, Acqua di Parma cologne on his skin, and something else beneath, something metallic and cold, like the smell of a freshly sharpened blade. $50,000. We will round down because I am feeling generous. $50,000 cash, in my hand, in my office, 72 hours from right now. Seagull reached into his jacket and withdrew a photograph. He laid it on Sinatra's chest, almost tenderly, like a parent tucking in a child. "That is Johnny Rossi. Used to play saxophone at the Trocadero on Sunset. Pretty good, actually. Had a wife, 2 kids, a nice house in Glendale. He also owed me money. He also thought I was making empty threats." Sinatra looked at the photograph. His stomach convulsed. What he saw had once been human legs, 2 of them attached to a torso that was mercifully out of frame. But the legs themselves, they were not legs anymore. They were wreckage, twisted at angles that human joints were never meant to achieve. Bones protruded through split skin. The kneecaps appeared to have been shattered so completely that the joints had simply collapsed inward. "Johnny crawls now," Seagull said conversationally. "Drags himself around his house on what is left. Cannot work anymore, obviously. Wife left him. Kids do not visit. He just sits there in that house in Glendale, dragging himself from room to room, thinking about the $5,500 he decided was not worth paying." Seagull stood up, straightened his jacket, shot his cuffs. 72 hours, Frankie. Starting right now. Bring me $50,000 cash, and we part as friends. Fail to bring me $50,000 cash, and my associates here will visit you, and what they do to you will make what happened to Johnny Rossi look like a Swedish massage." He turned to walk away, then paused, looked back over his shoulder. "And please, do not insult my intelligence by running. I have friends in New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, Miami, Havana. I will find you inside 24 hours no matter where you go on this earth. And if you make me chase you, it will not be your legs. It will be your hands, your throat, everything that makes you what you are." He smiled. That cherub smile that had charmed Hollywood starlets and senators' wives. 72 hours. Clock is ticking. The doors swung closed behind him. Frank Sinatra lay on the floor of the Flamingo Casino, staring up at the crystal chandeliers that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime, and felt something crack inside his chest. Not a rib, something deeper. The part of him that had always believed his voice made him special. His talent made him untouchable. His fame made him safe. Nobody helped him up. 200 people watched, and not one of them moved, because everyone understood. Helping Frank Sinatra now meant becoming an enemy of Bugsy Siegel, and Bugsy Siegel's enemies did not last long. Finally, after what felt like hours, but was probably 90 seconds, Sinatra rolled onto his side, pushed himself to his knees, rose to his feet. The photograph of Johnny Rossi's legs had fallen to the carpet. He stared at it, did not pick it up. Then he walked toward the exit, keeping his eyes forward, feeling every gaze upon him like a physical weight, hearing the whispers start behind him like wind through dead leaves. The clock above the casino entrance read 3:23 in the morning, 71 hours and 37 minutes. His hands would not stop shaking. Sinatra walked through the casino doors into the Nevada night, and the February cold hit him like a slap. The neon flamingo sign buzzed and flickered above him, casting pink light across his sweat-soaked face. The desert stretched in every direction, dark, empty, infinite. He stood there for a long moment, breathing the frigid air, trying to make his brain function. $50,000. Where in God's name was he going to find $50,000 in 72 hours? He had contracts worth millions, future earnings that would make $50,000 look like pocket change, but contracts were not cash. Recording sessions scheduled for next month would not help him Tuesday night. He was asset rich and cash broke, like a king with vast lands and empty coffers. There had to be someone who could help. Someone who owed him a favor, loved him enough, feared losing him enough to put up that kind of money on 48 hours' notice. He made a mental list as he walked to his car. 23 names, friends, associates, people who had sworn eternal loyalty after he sang at their weddings, their parties, their fundraisers. By noon the next day, every name would be crossed off, and Frank Sinatra would understand something about human nature that would change him forever. Sunday morning, 9:17. His hotel room at the Flamingo, because where else could he go? He was trapped in the hotel of the man who wanted to cripple him, running up a room service tab he could not pay, making desperate phone calls on a telephone that might be tapped. 64 hours remained. The first call went to Tommy Dorsey, his former bandleader, the man who had given him his start, who had believed in him when he was just a skinny kid from Hoboken with a voice and a dream. "Tommy, I need help. I am in trouble." "What kind of trouble?" "Seagull. I owe him money. 50,000. He is going to—" Click. The line went dead. Tommy Dorsey, who had once called Sinatra the son I never had hung up at the mention of a single name. Sinatra stared at the receiver, dialed again. Harry James, trumpet player, dear friend, the man who had first hired him back in '39 when nobody knew who Frank Sinatra was. Harry, it is Frankie. I am in Las Vegas. I am in serious trouble. I heard. Harry's voice was strained. Word travels fast. Then you know I need help. 50,000, Harry. I would not ask if... Frankie, stop. Listen to me. Harry's words came out in a rush, low and urgent. I love you like a brother. You know that. But I have a wife. I have children. If I give you money for Seagull's debt and Seagull finds out I helped you, I become part of this. My family becomes part of this. Harry, I am sorry, Frankie. I truly am, but I cannot. Click. 58 hours remained. MGM Studios. His contract was worth $2 million over 5 years. Surely they would advance him $50,000 against future earnings. He was their property, their asset. It was in their interest to keep him walking. The studio representative's voice was polished chrome. Mr. Sinatra, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer does not involve itself in the personal gambling debts of its contracted performers. Company policy. I am certain you understand. I am one of your biggest stars. My pictures gross millions. Your name is currently being associated with an incident at the Flamingo Casino that is already making its way through every gossip column in the country. Frankly, Mr. Sinatra, the studio's position is that you created this situation through your own choices, and you must resolve it through your own means. We wish you the best of luck. Click. By 3 p.m, Sinatra had called 14 people. 14 flat refusals, some apologetic, some cold. One, a producer named Al Levy, who had literally wept with gratitude when Sinatra agreed to perform at his daughter's bat mitzvah, laughed out loud before hanging up. 50,000 for Bugsy Siegel. Frank, I like you, but I do not like you that much. Good luck. 42 hours remained. The calls became more desperate, more humiliating. He called a third cousin in Newark who worked at a bank, a former girlfriend's father who owned car dealerships, a nightclub owner who had once drunkenly promised, anything you ever need, Frankie, anything at all. Nothing, nothing, nothing. At 9 that evening, hands trembling so badly he could barely hold the receiver, Sinatra called Hoboken, called his mother. Ma, I need money, a lot of money. Dolly Sinatra had survived poverty, the Depression, a husband who could barely hold a job, and a son who had left home at 17 to chase an impossible dream. She was not a woman who frightened easily. How much, Frankie? $50,000. Silence. Dead air humming across 1,500 miles of telephone wire. Then his mother laughed. But it was not a happy sound. It was the laugh of a woman who had just heard something so absurd, so impossible, so terrifying, that laughter was the only response that made sense. Frankie, where would I get $50,000? I do not have $50,000. Your father does not have $50,000. Everyone we know put together does not have $50,000. Ma, they are going to hurt me. They are going to break my legs. I will never walk again. I will never... Frankie, her voice cracked. Frankie, my boy, I cannot help you. I would sell my soul to help you, but I cannot. Then what do I do? Long pause. When she spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. Pray. Pray to the Blessed Virgin. Light a candle. Beg for a miracle. Because that is what you need now, my son. A miracle. Click. Frank Sinatra set down the telephone, walked to the bathroom, turned on the light. A stranger stared back at him from the mirror. Gray skin, hollow eyes, 2 days of stubble, a face that belonged on a corpse. Who was this man? Where had Frank Sinatra gone? 36 hours remained. He thought about the window. His room was on the 14th floor. It would be quick. It would be painless. It would be better than what Seagull had planned for him. He thought about it for 11 minutes. Then he walked back to the telephone. There was one more call to make, one more name on the list, a name he had saved for last because using it would cost him something he was not sure he could afford. Willie Moretti, his godfather, the man who had helped launch his career by convincing Tommy Dorsey to release him from an exploitative contract. The man who had connections to every Italian crime family on the eastern seaboard. If anyone could help, it was Willie. If anyone would help, it was Willie. The phone rang 4 times before a gruff voice answered. "Willie, it is Frankie. I need to see you. Tonight." What Sinatra did not know, what he could not possibly have imagined, was that while he begged and pleaded and humiliated himself on telephone lines across America, information about his situation was already traveling in the opposite direction, east instead of west, not toward the Italian families he thought might save him, toward Harlem, toward a man named Ellsworth Raymond Johnson, a man everyone called Bumpy, a man who had never met Frank Sinatra, never spoken to him, never occupied the same universe as him, but a man who was about to pay $50,000 to save a stranger's legs and ask for absolutely nothing in return. Sunday night, 9:41 in the evening, 1,500 miles east of Las Vegas, in a place that might as well have existed on a different planet. Minton's Playhouse, 118th Street, Harlem, New York, the birthplace of bebop, the Church of Jazz, a narrow room with a low ceiling where the most revolutionary music in America was being invented night after night by young black men who would never see a fraction of the fame their white imitators would eventually enjoy. The air inside was thick with cigarette smoke, bourbon fumes, and genius. On the small stage, a 26-year-old pianist named Thelonious Monk was doing things to chord progressions that made conservatory-trained musicians weep with confusion and jealousy. At the bar, men in sharp suits discussed numbers, policy, and the complex economics of survival in a city that wanted them to fail. And in the corner booth, the same booth he occupied every Sunday night, the booth that no one else ever sat in, the booth that might as well have had his name engraved on a brass plaque, sat Ellsworth Raymond Johnson, Bumpy to everyone who knew him, the uncrowned king of Harlem. He did not look like a king. That was the first thing that surprised people who met him expecting a monster. Bumpy Johnson was 41 years old, medium height, with a face that seemed permanently composed into an expression of gentle thoughtfulness. He wore a dark charcoal suit, conservatively cut, nothing flashy, a burgundy silk tie, wire-rimmed spectacles that made him look more like a professor than a crime lord. On the table in front of him sat a glass of Blanton's bourbon, barely touched, and a book, Fyodor Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment in the original Russian. He had taught himself the language during a stretch in Sing Sing because he had nothing else to do with his time except improve his mind. Bumpy Johnson controlled every illegal lottery, every numbers game, every policy bank in Harlem. His organization employed over 1,000 people and generated revenues that would have made legitimate corporations envious. He had survived wars with Dutch Schultz, Lucky Luciano, and a dozen other men who had tried to take Harlem from its own people. He had served multiple prison terms on charges that ranged from assault to narcotics, most of them manufactured by white gangsters who wanted him removed from the board. But to the people of Harlem, he was something else entirely, a protector, a benefactor, a man who made sure that grandmothers could walk to church unmolested and children could play in the streets without fear, a man who funded scholarships and paid medical bills and made problems disappear for people who had nowhere else to turn. He was reading a passage about redemption when a man approached his table. Jelly Wilson, one of Bumpy's runners who worked a second job as a busboy at the Flamingo Hotel in Las Vegas. He knew the rules, Never disturb the boss during music, never speak unless spoken to, never bring problems to this sanctuary unless they were urgent. The look on Jelly's face said this was urgent. Mr. Johnson. Jelly leaned close, voice barely above a whisper. Something happened in Vegas last night. Something you need to know about. Bumpy did not look up from his book. I am listening. Frank Sinatra, the singer. Bugsy Siegel threw him on the floor in front of 200 people, put his foot on his chest, gave him 72 hours to pay $50,000 or they break his legs. Now, Bumpy looked up. Tell me everything. For the next 8 minutes, Jelly recounted every detail he had witnessed and every piece of information he had gathered in the hours since. The public humiliation, the photograph of Johnny Rossi's destroyed legs, the 72-hour deadline, the fact that Sinatra had spent the entire day calling everyone he knew, begging for help, and been refused by every single person. Not one, Jelly said. Not one person helped him. His bandleader hung up on him. His movie studio told him to get lost. His own mother said she could not help. The man is completely alone. When Jelly finished, Bumpy was silent. On stage, Monk launched into an angular, dissonant improvisation that cleared half the dance floor and made the remaining listeners lean forward in rapture. So, Bumpy said finally, his voice soft, the man who sings about love as if he invented the emotion, that man is on his knees begging for money, and every friend he thought he had has abandoned him. Yes, sir. Not his record company, not his film studio, not his business partners, not his family. Nobody, sir, not a soul. Bumpy picked up his bourbon, held it to the light. The amber liquid caught the stage lights and glowed like trapped fire. How much time does he have left? About 36 hours now, sir. And how far is Las Vegas from here by car? Jelly blinked at the unexpected question. Maybe 35, 40 hours driving straight through? Why? Bumpy set down the glass without drinking. Find Red Daly. Tell him to come here immediately. Tell him to bring a travel bag. And tell him to stop at the safe house on Lenox Avenue and pick up $50,000 cash. Jelly's jaw dropped. Actually dropped, like in a cartoon. Sir, Mr. Johnson, that is a white singer. Why would you? Because I said so. Bumpy's voice did not change, did not rise, but something in his eyes shifted, and Jelly took an involuntary step backward. That is reason enough. Now go. Yes, sir. Right away, sir. Jelly practically ran out of the club. Bumpy turned back to the stage. Monk was deep into his solo now, fingers dancing across the keys, creating something that had never existed before and would never exist again in quite the same way. Why would a black gangster from Harlem pay $50,000 to save a white singer he had never met? Bumpy had his reasons he had never spoken aloud to anyone, reasons that lived in a prison cell in Pennsylvania, in the darkest night of his life, in a song that came through a corridor radio when he had lost everything that mattered. But those reasons were his alone. He would share them with no one. Not yet. 47 minutes later, Red Daly walked into Minton's Playhouse. Red was 32 years old, light-skinned enough to pass for Italian or Greek in the right light, which was exactly why Bumpy used him for jobs that required moving through white spaces. He was smart, reliable, and utterly loyal, 3 qualities that Bumpy valued above all others. He carried a leather overnight bag in one hand and a briefcase in the other. The briefcase was heavy. $50,000 in cash weighs approximately 44 pounds. You called, Mr. Johnson? Sit down, Red. Red sat across from his boss, setting the briefcase on the seat beside him. I have a job for you. You are going to drive to Las Vegas. You are going to arrive by midnight Tuesday. You are going to find a bar called the Golden Horse, 5 miles off the Strip. You are going to ask for Mickey Cohen, who is Bugsy Siegel's right hand on the West Coast, and you are going to give him that briefcase." Red's face remained impassive, but his eyes flickered to the briefcase. "What is in the briefcase, sir?" $50,000. "And what is the $50,000 for?" "It is to pay off a debt. A man named Frank Sinatra owes Seagull $50,000, and he cannot pay. If he does not pay by midnight Tuesday, they will break his legs, probably end his career, possibly end his life." Red processed this information. "Frank Sinatra, the singer." "Yes." "The white singer?" "Yes." "You want me to drive 40 hours across the country to pay off a white singer's gambling debt to Bugsy Siegel?" "Yes." Red was quiet for a moment. He had worked for Bumpy Johnson for 11 years. He had done many things in those 11 years, some legal, most not, a few that he tried not to think about in the small hours of the night. But this made no sense. This contradicted everything he understood about how the world worked. He asked the question anyway. "May I ask why, sir?" "You may ask. I am choosing not to answer." Red nodded. That was that. "There is one more thing," Bumpy continued. "One condition that is absolutely non-negotiable. When you give Cohen the money, when you clear Sinatra's debt, you will tell him that the benefactor wishes to remain anonymous. You will not mention my name. You will not mention Harlem. You will say only that a man from New York, who admires Sinatra's voice, has chosen to help him. If Cohen pushes, and he will push, you will say nothing more. And if Sinatra himself asks who paid his debt, he must never know, never, not from Cohen, not from Seagull, not from anyone. If Frank Sinatra ever discovers who saved him, it must not come from us. That is essential. Do you understand?" Red did not understand, but he nodded anyway. "Yes, sir, I understand." "Good." Bumpy reached into his jacket and withdrew a folded piece of paper. "This has the address of the Golden Horse and the name of the man you will ask for. There is also a number to call if you run into trouble on the road. Do not use it unless absolutely necessary." Red took the paper, tucked it into his inside pocket. "One more thing." Bumpy's voice dropped even lower. "If Cohen or anyone else threatens to harm Sinatra despite the payment, if they suggest they will break his legs anyway, as an example, or for entertainment, you will deliver a message from me." "What message?" "Tell them that if anything happens to Frank Sinatra after this debt is paid, I will take it as a personal insult. And when I am personally insulted, I have a tendency to make my displeasure known in ways that affect supply chains, labor relations, municipal inspections, and other aspects of business that make life difficult for everyone involved. Tell them that I have friends in the unions, friends in the ports, friends in places that can make a casino's operating costs triple overnight." Red absorbed this. "You are threatening Bugsy Siegel. I am communicating clearly. There is a difference. Seagull is not a man who responds well to threats. Neither am I." Bumpy finally picked up his bourbon, took a small sip. "Now go. You have 40 hours of driving ahead of you. Stop only for gas. Sleep when you reach Las Vegas. And Red—" "Yes, sir?" "Drive carefully. You are carrying more than money in that briefcase. You are carrying a man's future." Red stood, picked up the briefcase. Its weight seemed different now. "I will not let you down, Mr. Johnson." "I know you will not. That is why I chose you." Red walked out of Minton's Playhouse into the Harlem night. The streets were alive with Sunday evening energy, churches letting out, restaurants filling up, couples strolling arm in arm. A world completely separate from the neon desert 1,500 miles away, where a famous singer was contemplating whether the 14th floor window might be easier than waiting for Tuesday. Red got into his Cadillac, set the briefcase on the passenger seat, started the engine. 40 hours of driving, $50,000 in cash, a white singer's legs hanging in the balance. He pulled away from the curb and headed west. 31 hours remained on Siegel's deadline. The clock was ticking, and Frank Sinatra, sitting in his Las Vegas hotel room with a bottle of bourbon and a growing certainty that no one in the world was coming to save him, had no idea that salvation was already on its way. He would not learn the truth for 3 more years, and when he finally did, it would change everything he thought he understood about friendship, loyalty, and the human heart. Monday, 1,400 miles of American highway stretched behind Red Daly like a ribbon of gray memory. He had crossed New Jersey in darkness, Pennsylvania in early morning light, Ohio as the sun climbed toward noon. Now he was somewhere in Kansas, the landscape flat and endless, the road cutting through wheat fields like a surgical incision. 21 hours remaining. His eyes burned. His back ached. His hands had locked into claws around the steering wheel. He had stopped 4 times, twice for gas, twice to urinate in roadside ditches. He had not slept. He had eaten nothing except gas station coffee and stale sandwiches that tasted like cardboard and desperation. The briefcase sat beside him. $50,000. 44 pounds of paper that represented more money than most people would earn in 20 years. Red thought about the singer, Frank Sinatra. He had heard the records, of course. Everyone had heard the records. That voice like honey and heartbreak, singing about love and loss and loneliness in a way that made even cynical gangsters feel something in their chests. But what did that matter? Sinatra was white. Sinatra had probably never set foot in Harlem except maybe to visit a jazz club where he could soak up black music and turn it into hits that made him rich. Sinatra had probably never thought about men like Bumpy Johnson, men like Red Daly, men who existed in the shadows of American success. So why was Bumpy doing this? Red had asked. Bumpy had declined to answer. There were rumors, of course. There were always rumors. Some said Bumpy had a secret child somewhere, a mixed-race son or daughter who would inherit everything. Some said Bumpy was dying, trying to make peace with God before the end. Some said Bumpy had lost his mind, that the years in prison had finally cracked him. Red did not believe any of it. He had known Bumpy Johnson for 11 years, had seen him make decisions that seemed crazy at the time and turned out to be brilliant, had seen him show mercy when everyone expected brutality, and brutality when everyone expected mercy. Bumpy operated on a level that ordinary people could not comprehend. If Bumpy said pay the debt got paid. That was all that mattered. Red pressed the accelerator. The Kansas wheat fields blurred past. 19 hours remaining. Meanwhile, in Las Vegas, Frank Sinatra had stopped answering his telephone. It did not matter. Nobody was calling anyway. He sat in his hotel room with the curtains drawn, a bottle of Old Forester on the nightstand, a half-empty glass in his hand. He had not eaten since Saturday night, had not slept since Friday, had not bathed, shaved, or changed his clothes since the floor of the Flamingo Casino. The photograph of Johnny Rossi's leg sat on the dresser. He could not stop looking at it. This was how it ended then. Not with a triumphant final concert, not with a loving family at his bedside, not with the accolades and honors that he had always assumed would mark his passing. It ended in a Las Vegas hotel room, alone, waiting for men with crowbars to come and destroy the only things that let him stand on a stage: his legs, his voice, his life. At 4 p.m, someone knocked on his door. Sinatra did not answer. The knock came again. "Mr. Sinatra, telegram for you." He dragged himself to the door, opened it a crack. A bellhop stood there with an envelope. Sinatra took it, closed the door, tore it open. "Frankie, Stop working on situation. Stop cannot promise anything. Stop stay, put, stop Willie. Willie Moretti, his godfather, working on situation. A spark of hope flickered in Sinatra's chest, then died. Working on situation meant nothing. Cannot promise anything meant everything. Willie was going through the motions, performing the obligations of godfather, but he would not produce $50,000. He could not. The numbers did not work. The politics did not work. No Italian family was going to war with Bugsy Siegel over a singer's gambling debt. Sinatra crumpled the telegram, dropped it on the floor. 15 hours remaining. He walked to the window, pulled back the curtain. The Las Vegas sun was beginning its descent toward the western mountains, painting the desert in shades of gold and blood. Beautiful. The end of the world was always beautiful. Tuesday night, 11:41 in the evening, 19 minutes until midnight. The Golden Horse Bar sat 5 miles off the Las Vegas Strip, in a part of town where tourists never ventured and smart locals learned not to ask questions. The parking lot held 6 cars. The neon sign buzzed and flickered. Inside, the air smelled of spilled beer and old violence. Red Daly walked through the front door. He had made it. 40 hours of driving, 4 states, 1,500 miles. His eyes felt like sandpaper. His muscles screamed with every movement. But he was here, and he was on time, and the briefcase in his hand contained the answer to Frank Sinatra's prayers. The bartender looked up, saw a light-skinned black man in a rumpled suit carrying a briefcase, looking like he had just driven across the country. "Kitchen is closed. I am not here to eat. I need to see Mickey Cohen." The bartender's expression did not change, but something shifted behind his eyes. "Never heard of him. Tell him there is a man here from New York with $50,000 cash. Tell him it concerns the Sinatra matter." The bartender stared at Red for a long moment. Then he disappeared through a door behind. "Nobody touches him. You have my word, and my word is Bugsy's word." Red nodded. "Then we are finished here." He turned and walked out of the room, down the hall, through the bar, into the Nevada night. At exactly midnight, the telephone rang in Frank Sinatra's hotel room. He was lying on the bed, fully clothed, staring at the ceiling. He had been staring at the ceiling for 3 hours. In his mind, he was composing his own obituary. Frank Sinatra, born 1915, died 1947, cause of death, complications from gambling. The telephone rang again. He reached for it, certain it was Siegel's men, certain they were calling to tell him where to go, what door to enter, what room to wait in while they did what they were going to do. "Yes, Mr. Sinatra." The voice belonged to the hotel manager. "I have been asked to inform you that your account with the casino has been settled in full. Mr. Seagull sends his regards and wishes you a pleasant remainder of your stay." Sinatra could not process the words. "What?" "Your debt, sir. It has been paid. You are free to leave at your convenience." "Who paid?" "I am afraid I do not have that information, sir. I was only told to deliver the message. Is there anything else I can help you with this evening?" Sinatra could not speak. "Sir, are you there?" "Yes, thank you." He hung up. For a long moment he did not move, did not breathe, did not dare believe that what he had just heard was real. Then he stood up, walked to the window, pulled back the curtain. The Las Vegas Strip glittered in the darkness. A million lights, a million dreams, a million ways to lose everything. But Frank Sinatra had not lost. Someone had saved him. Who? It was a question that would consume him for the next 3 years. A question that would lead him down wrong paths, through false assumptions, into debts of gratitude owed to men who had never lifted a finger to help him. And when he finally learned the answer in a Harlem jazz club in 1950, It would shatter everything he thought he knew about friendship, about loyalty, about what it meant to be saved by someone who wanted nothing in return. But that discovery was still 3 years away. Tonight, Frank Sinatra simply stood at the window and wept. Wednesday morning, 2:17 in the morning. Bugsy Siegel stood at the window of his private office on the top floor of the Flamingo Casino, staring out at the desert darkness. Behind him, Mickey Cohen sat in a leather armchair, the empty briefcase on the floor beside him. The money had been counted, verified, locked in the safe, $50,000. The debt was paid, and Bugsy Siegel was furious. "Say that name again." Cohen shifted in his chair. He had seen Seagull angry before, had seen him beat men unconscious over minor insults, had seen him go from smiling to murderous in the space of a single heartbeat. The calm in Siegel's voice right now was worse than any rage. Bumpy Johnson. At least that is what the messenger implied. He never confirmed it directly, but a black man. Seagull turned from the window. His angel eyes were flat, empty, like windows into a room where nothing lived. A black gangster from Harlem thinks he can interfere with my business, thinks he can walk into my casino, pay off my debts, and make me look like a fool. "Boss, the money is good. 50,000 cash. The debt is cleared, and we are ahead because I do not care about the money." Seagull walked to his desk, picked up a crystal paperweight, turned it over in his hands. "I wanted to break that singer's legs. Not for the 50,000, that is pocket change. I wanted to break his legs because every degenerate gambler from here to Atlantic City needs to understand what happens when you owe Bugsy Siegel and cannot pay. I wanted an example, and now some Harlem N has stolen my example." He hurled the paperweight against the wall. It shattered into 1,000 glittering fragments. Now what does everyone see? They see that anyone with enough money can bail out their friends. They see that Bugsy Siegel can be bought off. They see that I am soft. Cohen chose his next words with the care of a man defusing a bomb. "Boss, if we touch Sinatra now, after the debt is paid, we start a war with Harlem. Johnson has connections we cannot ignore. Black unions control the docks in New York. Black truckers move half the freight on the eastern seaboard. He has people in the NYPD, in the courts, in places that could make our lives very complicated very fast. You think I am afraid of some N with connections? I think the cost-benefit analysis does not favor action at this time." Seagull stared at Cohen for a long moment. The silence stretched like a wire about to snap. Then, slowly, he sat down behind his desk. "Fine. The singer walks. But you send a message to Johnson. You find a way to make sure he understands that I remember this. And one day, not today, not tomorrow, but one day, I will remind him who runs things on this coast. I will make sure he gets the message. But here is what Bugsy Siegel did not know. Here is what he could not possibly have foreseen. In 5 months and 9 days, on the evening of June 20th, 1947, Bugsy Siegel would be sitting in the living room of his girlfriend Virginia Hill's mansion in Beverly Hills. He would be reading the Los Angeles Times, reviewing coverage of the Flamingo's improved performance. He would be thinking about expansion plans, about new investors, about the empire he was building in the desert. And then 9 bullets would come through the window. 2 would strike him in the head. The first would enter through his right cheek and exit through his neck. The second would blow out his left eye, sending it 15 feet across the room, where it would be found the next morning on the tile floor of the dining room. His own partners ordered the hit: Meyer Lansky, Lucky Luciano, the men who had bankrolled the Flamingo and watched Seagull spend $6 million on a casino that should have cost $2 million. They decided he had become a liability. They decided the desert dream was not worth the dreamer. Bugsy Siegel never got his chance to remind Bumpy Johnson of anything. He never got his chance to break anyone's legs ever again. But on that February night in 1947, none of that had happened yet. On that February night, Seagull was still the most feared man in Las Vegas, still convinced of his own immortality. And Frank Sinatra was packing his bags, preparing to leave the Flamingo at first light, still not knowing who had saved his legs. The mystery would consume him for 3 years. Frank Sinatra drove out of Las Vegas on Wednesday morning, February 12, 1947, as the sun broke over the eastern mountains and painted the desert in shades of gold and rose. He drove his own car, a blue Cadillac convertible with the top down, despite the February chill. He wanted the cold wind on his face, wanted to feel something physical and real after 72 hours of psychological torture. Someone had paid $50,000 for him. Someone had saved his career, his legs, his life, and that someone wanted to remain anonymous. The questions circled in his mind like vultures as the miles rolled past. Who had that kind of money? Who had connections powerful enough to walk into a meeting with Mickey Cohen and walk out alive? Who would spend a fortune to help him and ask for nothing in return? By the time he reached Los Angeles, Sinatra had convinced himself of the answer. It must have been one of the Italian families, Frank Costello probably, or maybe Vito Genovese, someone who saw value in keeping the voice of America singing, someone who expected repayment, not in cash, but in favors, appearances, performances, the kind of access that only a celebrity could provide. This assumption would shape the next 3 years of his life, and it was completely, utterly wrong. Over the following months and years, Frank Sinatra threw himself into what he believed was his debt. He sang at 14 mob weddings between 47 and 50. He appeared at 6 funerals for men whose names made FBI agents reach for their files. He gave private concerts in the homes of people who could have him eliminated with a single phone call. Every time a request came through the channels, a wedding in Jersey, a birthday party in Brooklyn, a fundraiser in Miami, Sinatra said yes. He believed he owed these men his legs. He believed he was working off a debt of honor. And every time, he tried to discover who had actually saved him. "Was it you?" he asked Frank Costello at a dinner party in the spring of '48. Costello smiled his thin smile and shook his head. "Frankie, if I had paid that debt, you would know about it. I am not a man who does favors anonymously." "Was it you?" he asked Vito Genovese at a funeral in '49. Genovese laughed out loud. "You think I would spend $50,000 on a singer? I like your voice, Frankie, but I do not like it that much." "Was it you?" he asked every connected man he encountered, every boss, every underboss, every soldier with enough rank to plausibly have access to $50,000 in cash. Nobody claimed credit. This drove Sinatra to the edge of madness. In his world, the world of show business, the world of egos and fame, people fought for credit, people killed for recognition, people destroyed relationships over who got their name above the title. But whoever had saved him wanted nothing. No recognition, no repayment, no relationship. It made no sense. Meanwhile, 1,500 miles east, Bumpy Johnson watched from Harlem as Sinatra performed for the wrong people. He read about the mob weddings in gossip columns, heard about the private concerts through his network, and he smiled his small, private smile. "That white boy is looking in all the wrong places," he told his wife Mamie one evening in '49. They were sitting in their Harlem apartment, Sinatra's voice drifting from the radio in the corner. "He thinks some Italian saved him. He has no idea." "Why do you not tell him?" Mamie asked. "He has been searching for 3 years. It would give him peace." Bumpy shook his head. because that is not why I did it. I did not save him so he would owe me. I did not save him so he would feel obligated. I saved him because he stopped. Even with Mamie, even after 20 years of marriage, there were things he could not say. Because his voice matters, he finished quietly. The world needs that voice. That is enough. But secrets have a way of escaping, and in November of 1950, after 3 years of searching, Frank Sinatra would finally learn the truth. It would happen in the most unexpected way, from the most unexpected source, and it would shatter everything he thought he knew. November 20th, 1950, 3:17 in the morning, El Morocco nightclub, East 54th Street, Manhattan, the most exclusive club in New York, the place where society queens rubbed elbows with gangsters and movie stars pretended not to notice either. Zebra-striped banquettes, blue lighting, champagne flowing like water. The beautiful people of America gathered here to see and be seen. Frank Sinatra sat in a corner booth, working on his fourth bourbon of the evening. His career was in freefall. The Bobby Soxers who had screamed his name in '43 had grown up and moved on. His records were not selling. Columbia was threatening to drop him. His marriage to Nancy was collapsing in slow motion. His affair with Ava Gardner was making headlines for all the wrong reasons. He was 34 years old and already felt like yesterday's news. Across the table sat Willie Moretti, his godfather, the man who had helped launch his career a decade ago. Willie was drunk tonight, dangerously drunk, the kind of drunk that makes men speak truths they have guarded for years. "Frankie!" Willie waved his glass, sloshing whiskey onto the tablecloth. "You know what your problem is. You spend all your time trying to repay people who never did anything for you." Sinatra looked up from his glass. "What is that supposed to mean? All those weddings, all those funerals, all those favors for Costello and Genovese and the rest of them." Willie laughed, a wet, sloppy sound. "You think you owe them, but you do not owe them a thing. Someone paid my debt to Seagull. Someone saved my legs. I have been trying to find out who for 3 years. 3 years." Willie shook his head. 3 years looking in the wrong direction. The noise of the club seemed to recede. The jazz band, the laughter, the clinking glasses, all of it faded into a distant murmur. "What do you mean, wrong direction?" Willie leaned forward. His breath was a fog of whiskey and cigars. "It was not Italian, Frankie. The man who saved you, he was not one of us." Sinatra's hand tightened on his glass. "Then who?" "Bumpy Johnson." 2 words, spoken in a whiskey-soaked slur. Sinatra did not move. "The black guy," Willie continued, oblivious to the earthquake he had just triggered, "from Harlem. He paid your debt. 50,000 cash. Sent a man across the country in the middle of the night. And the condition, the only condition, was that you would never know." "You are lying." "I am too drunk to lie. Everyone knows, Frankie. Everyone in the business has known for years. Everyone except you." "That is impossible. I never met Bumpy Johnson. I do not know him. We have never spoken. Why would a black gangster from Harlem pay $50,000 for a white singer he has never met?" Willie shrugged. "Nobody knows. He never explained. He just paid the money and told everyone to keep quiet." He drained his glass, set it down hard. "But you know what, Frankie? Maybe you should ask him yourself." Sinatra stood up so fast, he knocked over his bourbon. The amber liquid spread across the white tablecloth like a bloodstain. "Where do I find him?" "Harlem, Minton's Playhouse on 118th Street. He is there every Sunday night." "But Frankie, listen." Sinatra was already moving, pushing through the crowded club, heading for the exit. "Frankie, wait! You cannot just go to Harlem at 3 in the morning. You are white. You are famous. You will get yourself—" The door swung closed behind him. Sinatra burst onto 54th Street. The November cold hit him like a physical blow. His breath came in ragged gasps. His heart pounded against his ribs. 3 years. 3 years of searching. 3 years of performing for the wrong people, owing the wrong debts, thanking the wrong saviors. And all along, it was someone he had never met. Someone from a world he did not know existed. Someone who had asked for nothing in return. He had to know. He had to understand. Tonight. A cab idled at the corner. Sinatra ran to it, yanked open the door. The driver, a black man in his 50s with gray at his temples, turned around with an expression of polite inquiry that shifted to shock when he recognized his passenger. "Mr. Sinatra?" "Harlem, 118th Street, Minton's Playhouse." The driver stared at him. "Sir, it is almost 4 in the morning, and you are—" "I know what I am. I know what time it is. Drive." The driver hesitated, looked at Sinatra's face, saw something there that made arguments pointless. "It is your funeral." The cab pulled away from the curb. 23 minutes later, at 4:11 in the morning, Frank Sinatra walked through the doors of Minton's Playhouse, a white man in an expensive suit, in Harlem at 4 in the morning. The music stopped. Every head in the room turned toward the door. Sinatra stood there, framed in the entrance, feeling the weight of 40 pairs of eyes. The silence was absolute. He could hear his own breathing, his own heartbeat, the rustle of his own suit jacket as he shifted his weight. He had never felt more visible in his life, and he had never felt more unsure of what came next. A large man, 6'4", maybe 250 pounds, detached himself from the bar and moved to block Sinatra's path. "You lost, friend?" "I am looking for Bumpy Johnson." The big man did not blink. "Who is asking?" "My name is Frank Sinatra. I need to speak with him. It is important." "Important to who?" "To me. Please." The big man looked Sinatra up and down, seemed to be calculating something, odds perhaps, or consequences. Then a voice came from the back of the room, quiet, unhurried, carrying an authority that needed no volume to be absolute. "Let him through, Marcus." The big man hesitated, then stepped aside. Sinatra walked through the club, past tables of men who watched him with expressions that ranged from curiosity to hostility to something that might have been amusement. The room smelled of cigarette smoke and bourbon and something else, history being made. In the corner booth sat a man in a dark suit, medium height, wire-rimmed glasses, a face that seemed carved from patience itself. On the table in front of him lay a book in a language Sinatra did not recognize and a glass of bourbon, barely touched. Bumpy Johnson. Sinatra stopped at the edge of the table. For a long moment neither man spoke. The silence stretched between them like a bridge waiting to be crossed. Then Bumpy gestured to the seat across from him. "Sit down, Mr. Sinatra. I have been wondering how long it would take you to find me." Sinatra lowered himself into the booth. His hands were trembling, not from fear, from something he could not name, something that felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, about to learn whether he could fly. Bumpy Johnson studied him with the calm attention of a man who had seen everything and been surprised by nothing. Up close, he looked nothing like what Sinatra had expected. No menace in his face, no hardness in his eyes. He looked like a professor, a philosopher, a man who had made peace with the universe and its infinite cruelties. "You know who I am," Sinatra said. "Everyone knows who you are, Mr. Sinatra." "Then you know why I am here." Bumpy picked up his bourbon, swirled it gently, did not drink. "I imagine Willie Moretti finally lost his battle with discretion. He never could hold his liquor." "Is it true?" Sinatra's voice cracked on the question. 3 years ago. The Flamingo, $50,000. Did you pay my debt to Seagull? Silence. The jazz band had started playing again. Something soft and melancholy, a ballad about loss and longing, fitting music for this moment. Yes. One word, simple, direct, no hesitation. Sinatra felt the word hit him like a physical blow. For 3 years, he had searched. For 3 years, he had wondered. For 3 years, he had performed for the wrong people, owed gratitude to the wrong saviors, tried to repay a debt to men who had never lifted a finger. And now, here sat the truth, in a dark suit with wire-rimmed glasses, looking at him with an expression of absolute calm. Why? Bumpy set down his glass. You really want to know? I have been trying to find out for 3 years. I have sung at weddings for men I thought saved me. I have done favors for people who never helped me at all. I have spent 1,000 nights wondering who would pay $50,000 for a stranger and ask for nothing in return. Sinatra's voice broke. I need to understand, please. Bumpy was quiet for a long moment. The music played. The smoke drifted. The other patrons had returned to their conversations, giving the two men in the corner booth the privacy that important moments require. When Bumpy finally spoke, his voice was different, softer, more distant, as if he were speaking from somewhere far away, somewhere deep inside himself that he rarely visited. 1944, he began. Lewisburg Federal Penitentiary, Pennsylvania. I was serving 3 years on a weapons charge. A frame job, white gangsters who wanted me off the streets of Harlem. My cell was 6 feet by 8 feet. One window with bars, one cot, one toilet, and a radio that played in the corridor all night long. He paused, picked up his bourbon, still did not drink. In March of that year, I received a letter from my wife. Inside was news that broke something in me that I did not know could break. Sinatra did not speak, did not move. I have a daughter, Eloise, my only child, the reason I built everything I built, the reason I survived everything I survived. She was 17 years old in 1944, and she had decided that she was done waiting, done hoping, done believing that her father would ever be anything other than what he was, a criminal, a convict, a man who spent more time in prison cells than in her life. Bumpy's voice remained steady, but something flickered behind his eyes, something old and deep, and never fully healed. She wrote me a letter, 3 sentences. I am tired of having a criminal for a father. I am tired of waiting for you to change. I do not have a father anymore. Silence. That night was the darkest of my life. I lay on my cot and stared at the ceiling and felt something I had not felt since I was a boy, getting beaten by my stepfather in Charleston. Despair, true despair, the kind that makes you wonder if there is any point in drawing another breath. He finally took a sip of his bourbon, set the glass down with careful precision. And then, at 2 a.m, the radio in the corridor started playing a song, a young voice, clear and pure and full of a pain that matched my own. Sinatra felt something shift in his chest. The song was I'll Never Smile Again, and you sang it, Mr. Sinatra, as if you knew exactly what I was feeling, as if you were there in that cell with me, as if you understood what it meant to lose the thing you loved most in the world and know that it was your own fault. Bumpy met Sinatra's eyes. I lay there listening to your voice, and for the first time in 30 years, tears ran down my face. Not because the song was sad, because it was true, because someone out there, some white boy I had never met, would never meet, who existed in a world completely separate from mine, that someone understood, that someone had taken the pain I could not express and turned it into something beautiful. Sinatra's eyes were wet. He did not try to hide it. "Your voice saved me that night, Mr. Sinatra. Not from death. I was not going to end my life, but from something worse, from giving up, from losing the part of myself that still believed things could get better, from becoming the man my daughter already thought I was." Bumpy leaned back in his seat. "From that night forward, I collected every record you made. I listened to your voice when I planned operations, when I could not sleep, when I missed my daughter so much that I thought my chest would crack open. Your voice became the sound of hope to me, the sound of beauty in an ugly world, the sound of someone who understood." He fell silent. Sinatra could not speak, could not find words adequate to what he had just heard. "So when I learned what Seagull was planning," Bumpy continued, "when I heard that they were going to break your legs, destroy your career, silence that voice forever, I could not allow it. Not for recognition, not for gratitude, not for any kind of repayment. I simply could not allow the world to lose the voice that had saved me. Mr. Johnson, Bumpy, my friends call me Bumpy. Bumpy." Sinatra's voice was barely a whisper. "I do not know what to say. I have spent 3 years looking for the man who saved me, and I never imagined, I never dreamed, that it would be a black gangster from Harlem, that it would be someone who wanted nothing in return." Bumpy smiled, a small smile but genuine. "I already had my payment, Mr. Sinatra. I had it before I ever sent that money. Every time I listened to your records, every time your voice reminded me that there was beauty in this world, every time you helped me survive another night, that was payment enough. That will always be payment enough." Sinatra reached into his jacket, pulled out his wallet. "I want to repay you. The 50,000, interest, whatever you want." Bumpy shook his head. "Put that away. Please, I cannot—" "You cannot what? Accept that someone helped you without wanting something back?" Bumpy's voice was gentle but firm. "That is what is wrong with the world, Mr. Sinatra. Everyone keeps score. Everyone calculates. Everyone makes sure they never give more than they receive. But that is not friendship. That is not love. That is just business." He pushed his untouched bourbon toward Sinatra. "You want to repay me? Keep singing. Keep making records. Keep putting that voice out into the world where people like me can hear it. That is all I want. That is all I have ever wanted." Sinatra stared at the bourbon, then at the man across from him. "Then let me give you something that cannot be counted. Let me be your friend." Bumpy raised an eyebrow. "You understand what that means? Being friends with me? I am not a respectable man, Mr. Sinatra. I am a criminal, an outlaw. Associating with me could damage your career." Sinatra laughed. A genuine laugh, the first real one in longer than he could remember. "My career is already in ruins. Columbia is dropping me. My records do not sell. The Bobby Soxers have moved on. Being friends with you is probably the least of my problems. And when your career recovers, when you are on top again, will you still want to be friends with a black gangster from Harlem?" Sinatra looked Bumpy Johnson in the eye. "You paid $50,000 to save a stranger's legs. You drove a man across the country in the middle of the night. You threatened Bugsy Siegel to keep me safe. And you did all of it without wanting anything in return, without wanting me to know, without wanting credit or gratitude or recognition." He reached across the table, extended his hand. "In my entire life, no one has ever done anything like that for me. Not my family, not my friends, not my business partners, not anyone. You are the only person who has ever saved me without keeping score. That makes you the best friend I have ever had. And I will be damned if I let you go now that I have found you." Bumpy looked at the extended hand, a white hand, reaching across a table in a Harlem jazz club, reaching across decades of segregation and hatred and everything that America said these two men should be to each other. He took it. "All right, Mr. Sinatra, friends. Frank. My friends call me Frank. All right, Frank, friends." They sat in that booth until 10 in the morning, talking about music and family and loss, about daughters who stopped loving their fathers, about the weight of expectation, about loneliness and fame and what it meant to build something from nothing, about Russian literature and jazz improvisation and the strange ways that life connects people who should never have met. When Sinatra finally stood to leave, the morning sun was streaming through the windows of Minton's Playhouse. The club was empty now except for the cleaning staff. The night's cigarette smoke had cleared. Everything looked different in daylight. He shook Bumpy's hand one more time. "I will see you again. I know you will. Soon. Whenever you want. You know where to find me." Sinatra walked to the door, stopped, turned back. "Bumpy?" "Yes." "Thank you. For everything. For the money, for the silence, for not wanting anything back. I will spend the rest of my life trying to deserve what you did for me." Bumpy smiled his small smile. "Just keep singing, Frank. That is all I ask." Sinatra nodded, pushed through the door, walked out into the Harlem morning. The sun was warm on his face. Children were playing on the sidewalk. Church bells were ringing somewhere in the distance. The world was exactly the same as it had been yesterday, but everything felt different. He had come to Minton's Playhouse looking for the man who had saved his legs. He had found something much more valuable. He had found a friend. Over the next 18 years, Frank Sinatra and Bumpy Johnson would meet dozens of times, sometimes in Harlem, sometimes in Las Vegas, where Sinatra's career would eventually take him back as a headliner rather than a debtor, sometimes in private homes away from prying eyes, where they could talk without anyone watching. They never discussed business, never made deals, never exchanged favors or calculated obligations. They simply talked. Two men from opposite ends of the American spectrum, connected by music and loneliness and an act of grace that neither of them could fully explain. Sinatra's career recovered. He won an Academy Award for From Here to Eternity in 1954. He signed with Capitol Records and reinvented himself as a mature artist. He became, by the early 60s, arguably the biggest entertainer in the world. Through it all, he never forgot the man in the Harlem Jazz Club, never stopped visiting, never stopped listening to Bumpy's thoughts on music and life and the strange journey they had both traveled. And Bumpy never asked for anything, never mentioned the $50,000, never reminded Sinatra of the debt. He simply enjoyed the friendship, the music, the conversation, the unlikely connection across all the walls that America had built between them. Until July 4th, 1968. The phone rang in Sinatra's Bel Air mansion at 3 in the afternoon. He was preparing for a concert series in Las Vegas. 12 shows at the Sands, sold out months in advance. "Frank!" The voice on the line belonged to one of his assistants. "I have some news. Bumpy Johnson died this morning, heart attack, at a restaurant in Harlem." Sinatra did not respond. "Frank, are you there?" "Cancel the concerts." "What?" "Cancel them, all 12. I am going to New York." "Frank, that is impossible. The contracts alone—" "I do not care about the contracts. Cancel them." He hung up. 3 days later, on July 7th, 1968, Frank Sinatra walked into the Abyssinian Baptist Church in Harlem. 3,000 people filled the pews, spilled into the aisles, crowded onto the steps outside. Politicians and gangsters, musicians and street vendors, police officers and numbers runners, all gathered to say goodbye to the man they called the King of Harlem. And among them, in the third row, sat one white man in a black suit. The service was long. Speaker after speaker rose to praise Bumpy Johnson's generosity, his wisdom, his protection of Harlem's people. But when the time came for the final song, the pastor made an unexpected announcement. We have a special guest today, a man who asked to sing for his friend, Mr. Frank Sinatra. A murmur ran through the congregation. 3,000 heads turned to watch as Sinatra stood, walked to the front of the church, and took the microphone. He did not introduce himself, did not explain why he was there, did not offer context for the impossible sight of the world's most famous white entertainer singing at a black gangster's funeral. He simply closed his eyes and began to sing, "I'll never smile again until I smile at you." The same song, the song that had played in a prison corridor in 1944, the song that had saved Bumpy Johnson on the darkest night of his life, the song that had connected two strangers across an impossible distance. Sinatra sang it now for the man who had saved him, the man who had paid $50,000 for a stranger and asked for nothing in return, the man who had taught him what friendship really meant. Tears streamed down his face as he sang. He did not try to stop them, did not try to perform. He simply sang the truth of his grief, the truth of his gratitude, the truth of 21 years of friendship that no one outside this room would ever fully understand. When the song ended, the church was silent. Then, slowly, someone began to clap, then another, until 3,000 people were on their feet, applauding not just the song, but everything it represented. Sinatra returned to his seat. Mamie Johnson, Bumpy's widow, reached over and took his hand. "He would have loved that," she whispered. "He always loved your voice." "He saved my life," Sinatra whispered back, "and he never let me repay him." "You just did." After the service, Sinatra stood outside the church for a long time. The Harlem sun beat down. People filed past him, some nodding in recognition, some stopping to shake his hand. A world he did not belong to, showing him kindness he had not earned. A reporter approached, notepad ready. "Mr. Sinatra, can you explain what you are doing here? Your relationship with Bumpy Johnson?" Sinatra looked at the reporter for a long moment. "He was my friend," he said finally. "The best friend I ever had. And that is all anyone needs to know." He walked to his car and drove away. In the years that followed, Sinatra rarely spoke publicly about Bumpy Johnson. When asked about the funeral appearance, he would simply say they were friends and change the subject. The full story remained private, a secret shared only with those who had been there, who had witnessed it, who understood. But among certain circles, jazz musicians, Harlem old-timers, people who remembered the way things used to be, the story became legend. The tale of the white singer and the black gangster. The tale of $50,000 paid in the night. The tale of a friendship that crossed every line America had drawn. And at the center of that legend, one simple truth. In February of 1947, when Frank Sinatra had lost everything and everyone he thought he could count on, when he lay on the floor of a Las Vegas casino with a murderer's boot on his chest, when every friend he had abandoned him to his fate, in that darkest moment, salvation came from the most unexpected place imaginable. A man he had never met, a world he had never known, a debt he could never repay, and a friendship that would last until the very end. Frank Sinatra died on May 14th, 1998, 30 years after Bumpy Johnson. In his personal effects, his family found a single item that puzzled them, an old photograph of two men sitting in a jazz club booth, one black and one white, both smiling at the camera. On the back, in Sinatra's handwriting, were 3 words, "He saved me." No one in the family knew what it meant. No one asked. Some things are too sacred to explain. But somewhere in the vast beyond, if such a place exists, perhaps two old friends are sitting together again. Perhaps they are talking about music and daughters and the strange ways that life connects people who should never have met. Perhaps they are finally even, or perhaps they always were.